Story 1: Echoes from the Seventh Tunnel. Berlin never truly slept. Even at night, its streets buzzed with the soft hum of electric trains, the glow of vending machines, and the distant echo of footsteps. But under the surface, where the city's heart beat through tunnels and steel, there was another world. A colder, older world that had been forgotten. Jacob Brenner worked the night shift for the Berlin U-Bahn maintenance crew. He had done so for 8 years. At 42, with thinning hair and a tired back, he had grown used to the silence of the underground. The graffiti-covered walls, flickering tunnel lights, and occasional rats didn't bother him anymore. What mattered was the peace. No passengers. No noise. Just the tracks and the steady rhythm of routine. But tonight felt different. Jacob stood alone near the end of Line U2, inside an unused service tunnel known unofficially as the Seventh. It wasn't marked on public maps anymore. The entrance had been sealed in the late 80s after a collapse, though some claimed it never reopened for another reason, one Jacob had never bothered to ask about. Until now, he had been told by his supervisor, Klaus, to check the tunnel due to strange power fluctuations coming from that direction. Just a routine scan, Klaus said, nothing more. But the moment Jacob stepped into the seventh tunnel, his flashlight dimmed slightly. He tapped it. The beam flickered back to life. Old batteries, he muttered to himself. The air inside was colder than the rest of the tunnels. Not the usual underground chill, but something deeper, like walking into a basement that hadn't been touched in decades. The smell was odd too. Not damp or moldy, but metallic, like old coins and rusted iron. As he walked deeper, his boots echoed against the concrete floor. But after a few steps, he paused. There were other footsteps. Soft, faint, just behind his own. He spun around. Nothing. Just the long, dark tunnel stretching back toward the city lights. Empty. He took a deep breath and continued, heart beating a little faster. "Relax," he whispered. "Echoes. Just echoes." But they didn't sound like echoes. Echoes repeat your steps after you take them. These steps walked with him. The further he walked, the older the tunnel looked. The walls weren't concrete anymore, but lined with aged bricks, cracked and moss-covered. His flashlight caught strange symbols etched along the top of the archway. Not graffiti. Older. Like carvings. Then he heard it. A voice. A woman's voice. Faint. Singing. It echoed off the walls, melancholic, soft, almost like a lullaby. Jacob froze. It wasn't in German. Or English. The melody was unfamiliar, and yet it stirred something in him. Something cold and sad, as if he'd heard it long ago in a dream he'd forgotten. He turned slowly, shining his light in every direction. "Hello?" he called out. The singing stopped. Silence. He took a few steps forward and saw something ahead. A shadow. Human-sized. Standing still. His light flicked again. When it steadied, the figure was gone. Jacob rubbed his eyes. "No! Nope! Not tonight," he whispered. He turned to leave. But behind him, something whispered, very clearly, "Don't go back!" He froze. And the footsteps began again, this time not behind him, but in front. Coming closer. Jacob didn't move. The footsteps were getting louder, measured, deliberate, and impossibly clear in the stillness of the tunnel. His flashlight trembled slightly in his hand. He raised it again, aiming down the path ahead. Nothing. The light caught only bricks, dust, and thick air. But the footsteps kept coming. Then they stopped. Just a few meters ahead. Jacob's heart pounded in his ears. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. His voice felt like it had been swallowed by the tunnel itself. A low creaking noise echoed from the right wall. Jacob turned quickly and saw an old service door. He'd walked this stretch many times before, and he swore the door had never been there. It was made of heavy iron, painted dark red, the kind of industrial red that faded into black over time. A number was carved above it, scratched in crude lines, 7B. Jacob approached slowly. The door stood slightly ajar. From inside, a cold draft slipped out, carrying that same faint melody from earlier, soft, humming, distant. The woman's voice again. He should have turned back. Called Klaus. Reported a hallucination. But curiosity gnawed at his caution. He pushed the door open. It groaned, metal grinding on metal. Inside was a narrow corridor, low ceiling, walls lined with old tiles the color of bone. The floor was damp. Some of the lights above were still working, but they blinked like they were fighting to stay awake. Jacob stepped in. The door slammed shut behind him. He jumped and ran back, trying the handle. Locked. No, 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 he muttered, banging on it. The steel didn't even echo properly. It absorbed sound like thick fabric. Suddenly, the lights above him flickered one by one, not off, but on, stretching down the hallway as if inviting him deeper. Jacob turned slowly. He didn't want to go further, but standing still didn't feel any safer. So he walked. The tiles along the wall began to change. At first, they were just cracked and dirty. Then he saw handprints. Dozens of them. Some large, some small. All faintly burned into the surface, like someone had pressed against red-hot tiles. Then came the photos. He stopped. Polaroids, hundreds of them, had been taped across the walls. Faces of people, all looking directly into the camera. Men, women, children, all taken inside subway cars. Some photos were old and yellowed. Some looked recent. And in every photo, the same thing. Behind each person, through the window or reflection, stood the shadow of a man in a long coat with no visible face. Jacob backed away from the wall. His radio crackled. For the first time all night, he heard Klaus's voice. Jacob? You copy? He grabbed the radio fast. Klaus, I'm here. I went into the 7th tunnel and... But the voice on the other end wasn't Klaus. It was a whisper, and it spoke in the same strange language the woman had sung in. Jacob dropped the radio. It hit the ground with a sharp echo. The hallway around him shifted slightly. He felt it, like the very floor had breathed in. Then, ahead of him, he heard it, the rumble of a train. He frowned. There was no track in here. No rails. No power. But the sound grew louder. Then, from a side passage, Jacob saw it. A subway train. It wasn't real. Not fully. It glowed faintly, like a reflection on water. Its windows were foggy, its metal surface rusted beyond recognition. Yet it glided silently, smoothly, through the hallway, without wheels or rails. The train slowed to a stop beside him. The doors slid open. Inside, every seat was filled with people. Silent, pale, eyes open, unblinking. Some wore modern clothes. Others wore outfits from decades ago, 1970s, 1950s, even earlier. All of them stared forward. None of them moved. Jacob stepped closer, and then he saw one of them stand. A woman in a long black coat. She turned to him slowly. Her face was hollow. Not just pale or lifeless. Hollow, like it had been scooped out and left with only skin stretched over a void. She raised her hand, pointed to the door. "You're stopped," she said in perfect German. Jacob took a step back. Then all the passengers turned their heads at once, staring straight at him. and they began to whisper, "Get on! Get on! Get on!" He turned and ran. Back down the corridor, past the burning handprints, past the photos, past the humming voice that had turned into a low growl. His flashlight flickered violently as the lights above burst one by one behind him. He reached the red iron door, still locked. Then it opened, but not by his hand. The iron door groaned open as if pushed by an invisible hand. Jacob stumbled through it, nearly falling. The cold, tile-lined corridor was gone. He was back in the tunnel, the seventh tunnel. But something had changed. The air was thicker. It smelled of soil, mold, and something older, something like burnt bone. He turned around. The door was gone. No hinges. No outline. Just solid tunnel wall behind him. Jacob's breathing was loud now, sharp in the stillness. He wiped sweat from his brow, though the air was freezing. He needed to leave. His flashlight flickered again. He slapped it. This time, it died completely. Darkness wrapped around him like a wet blanket. He fumbled for his radio, but it only let out static and soft whispers, too faint to understand, but too clear to ignore. A sound echoed down the tunnel. Not footsteps. Not a train. Dragging. Something heavy, scraping across the ground. Jacob backed away slowly, keeping close to the tunnel wall. His fingers touched something rough. Brick. But as he followed the wall with his hand, the texture changed. Smooth, then wet, then warm. He yanked his hand back. It was a face. He couldn't see it, but he had touched the curve of a cheek, the socket of an eye, closed or missing, he couldn't tell, and cold lips that moved without sound. He turned and ran. Every step felt slower than the last. The tunnel stretched unnaturally, as if trying to hold him inside. Behind him, the dragging grew louder. And then, voices. Not whispering anymore. Singing. The same lullaby from earlier, but now it was dozens of voices in unison. Men, women, children, all humming the same tune in that alien language. The sound wrapped around him like a storm. Then he saw it, faint light ahead. A service station. A real one. He sprinted. The emergency lights blinked overhead as he burst into the small square platform, gasping for air. He wasn't alone. There was a man standing near the edge of the platform, staring down at the rails. An old worker's uniform. Black boots. Thick coat. His back was to Jacob. "Hey!" Jacob called out. "Hey, please, I need help." The man didn't move. Jacob stepped closer. "Sir?" The man slowly turned. His face was wrong. Not deformed, empty. Where eyes should be, there were only smooth dents in the skin. His mouth was too wide. His jaw hung loose, like it had been broken long ago and never healed. And yet, he smiled. Then he spoke in a deep, slow voice. "They never leave the seven." Jacob stumbled back. "W what?" "They never leave," the man repeated. "Only trade places." The lights above began to flicker again. The sound of a train rumbled from the tunnel. Jacob turned toward it, but saw only darkness. Then the platform light shut off completely, and in the pitch black, he heard footsteps right behind him. He spun. No one. He turned again, and the faceless man was inches from his face. "They need a new passenger," he whispered, and pushed Jacob onto the tracks. Jacob hit the rails hard. Pain burst through his leg. The train was coming now. He could feel the vibrations, impossible, but real. He scrambled to his feet, limping, blood dripping from his knee. He pulled himself up just as the ghost train, shimmering, soundless, glowing, glided past him. Inside, the passengers turned their heads again. They were watching him. A seat was empty now. One seat. Just one. Jacob didn't sleep for the next 3 nights. He was found by another maintenance worker hours later, collapsed near Tunnel 6. His story didn't make sense to anyone. No one believed there ever was a 7th tunnel. No service log showed his assignment that night. His supervisor, Klaus? Gone. No records of him ever working for the company. And the photo Jacob found in his locker the next day, the one he didn't put there, showed a blurry black and white image of a subway car from the 1960s. All passengers stared straight at the camera. And in the last seat by the window, barely visible in the shadow, was Jacob. Jacob stopped working the night shift. After what happened in the 7th tunnel, he filed a transfer request, but no one believed his report. They laughed at him in the office, told him he was overworked, said maybe he had fallen asleep near a gas leak. But when he quit, no one tried to stop him, not even HR. In fact, they never asked for his badge or uniform back. That should have been his first warning. 2 weeks passed. Jacob kept to himself, rarely leaving his apartment. But something wasn't right. His mirrors didn't reflect light correctly. His phone rang at exactly 2:07 a.m. each night. And outside his door, he'd often hear someone humming, a tune he now knew too well. Then came the letter. No postage stamp. No return address. Just a folded note slid under his door. In plain, typewritten text, it read, "You left something behind. One more shift. Come alone. You bought exit number 7, 3:07 a.m. There was no exit number 7. At least, not in any station Jacob remembered. But something deep inside him, something cold and familiar, knew exactly where to go. 3 a.m. Berlin Hauptbahnhof, the central station. Jacob stood near the main platform, staring at the glass map. Every line was there. Every tunnel. Except the one he remembered. No 7th tunnel. No 7B. No station with exit number 7. Still he waited. At 3:07 a.m., the lights overhead dimmed slightly. And he saw it. In the far left corner of the station, behind a janitor's closet, a narrow hallway lit by a single red bulb. He'd never seen it before, and yet it had always been there. Jacob stepped inside. The air changed immediately. Thick, dusty, like he had stepped underground, even though he hadn't descended. The hallway led to a stairwell. Each step was numbered in fading white paint. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then nothing. Just a black iron door. He pushed it open and stepped into another Berlin. At first, he thought it was a mistake. The city above looked the same. Same buildings, same cold night sky. But the lights were too dim. The stars too bright. The streets too empty. There were no people. No cars. No wind. Jacob walked to the U-Bahn entrance. The sign read, Line 7 for die Toten. Line 7, for the dead only. He went down. No hesitation now. No logic. His legs moved on their own. The train platform was dim and silent. Then a train arrived. The doors slid open. Empty. Jacob stepped in. The train began to move. As he sat, he noticed the seats weren't empty after all. They were filling up with copies of himself. Some wore his old uniform. Some were older. Some were bloody. One was missing its eyes. Another grinned too widely. All of them stared straight ahead, never blinking. Across the window, the tunnel outside wasn't made of brick or steel. It was teeth. Thousands of long, curved, yellowing teeth formed the walls, pulsing slightly like gums in a living mouth. The train wasn't riding on rails. It was being swallowed. Jacob tried to stand, but the other Jacobs moved in unison, grabbing his arms, his legs, his throat. They didn't scream. They just hummed the lullaby. And in that moment, Jacob remembered the final rule of the seventh tunnel, one he hadn't read, but had always been true. Every passenger feeds the track. When Jacob opened his eyes, he was back in his apartment. At least, that's what it looked like. But the walls were too perfect. The sky outside didn't move. The clock never changed. He walked to the mirror. His reflection stared back and smiled without him. Then it stepped away from the glass, and Jacob was left staring at an empty mirror. From behind him, dozens of voices whispered at once. "Welcome home, conductor." Jacob didn't just survive the seventh tunnel. He became it. Now, he is the one who opens the doors. He stands at the far end of forgotten platforms, in tunnels no longer listed on city maps, humming a lullaby in a dead language. And when the time is right, he lets someone else in. After all, the train always needs a new conductor, and someone always takes the wrong exit. It had been 5 years since Jacob vanished. Berlin moved on. Tracks were repaired. Stations updated. The official record showed no trace of him. To the world, Jacob Weber was a man who simply quit and disappeared. But one man never forgot. Leon Gotts, Jacob's younger brother, had always suspected something was wrong. He had seen the changes in Jacob before he vanished, the nervousness, the windows sealed shut, the mirrors covered, the constant hum he'd whistle under his breath like a reflex. Then the sudden resignation. Then nothing. No calls. No messages. Not even a body. Leon searched. For years. Through old U-Bahn schematics, forgotten blueprints, archives that hadn't been touched since the Cold War. The deeper he went, the more he realized that there had once been a Tunnel 7. A short-lived line shut down after a series of disappearances in the 1960s. Workers had died. Others went mad. No one talked about it anymore. But Leon found something else. Something worse. A photo. From 1961. A grainy black and white image of a tunnel repair team. And standing at the edge of the group, nearly out of frame, was Jacob Uneged, staring directly at the camera. Leon couldn't explain it. He didn't try to. He just kept going. Until one night, he found the way in. It began with a humming. He heard it in his sleep, first as a dream, then as a presence in the room. Always the same lullaby. Always from behind the walls. Then, at exactly 3:07 a.m., a station appeared in his dreams. A long-abandoned exit beneath Berlin Hauptbahnhof. A place that didn't exist, at least not anymore. He followed the dream. And when he went to the station the next day, the janitor's closet was unlocked. Leon descended the steps marked 7 to 1. At the bottom, a black iron door. Carved into the metal was a single sentence. "Only the last passenger may return." He pushed it open and stepped into the dark. The tunnel beyond was not Berlin. Not anymore. The walls breathed. The floor pulsed beneath his boots. The overhead lights were teeth again, tall and narrow, grinding softly as if chewing the silence. A train waited ahead. But it wasn't empty. It was full of copies of Jacob. Hundreds of him. Some sleeping. Some staring. Some smiling with mouths full of ash. And sitting alone at the very front was Jacob himself. Older. Paler. Eyes like two black mirrors. He smiled as Leon stepped closer. "You made it," Jacob said. "Where are we?" Leon asked, his voice shaking. "The end of the line," Jacob replied softly. "This is where they all come. Every city has a tunnel like this. Forgotten. Hungry." Leon stared at the walls. They moved like the inside of a throat. "You died down here," Leon whispered. "No." Jacob smiled wider. "I was born down here. Or maybe I was chosen." "Chosen for what?" "To drive the train." He stood up slowly and placed a hand on his brother's shoulder. "It's your turn now, Leon." Leon pulled away. "No, I'm not staying here. I'm not like you." "You are," Jacob said. "You always were." Leon turned to run, but the train doors slammed shut. The lights turned red. The humming started. All the other Jacobs began singing. Leon covered his ears, but it was inside his head now, an endless melody, a spiral of voices. The tunnel pulsed around him. Then, suddenly, silence. He opened his eyes. The other Jacobs were gone. So was Jacob. The train was empty, and Leon was sitting in the conductor's seat. The lights blinked once. The control panel lit up with one word: departing. Later that year, Berliners began reporting strange train sightings. An old subway car that didn't match any model on record. It would appear late at night, never on schedule, never at the same station. Those who stepped inside were never seen again. Those who stayed behind said they heard singing through the closed doors. And sometimes, when they looked through the window, they swore they saw two men at the front of the train. Brothers, smiling, guiding the subway into tunnels that shouldn't exist. The 7th tunnel still breathes beneath Berlin. It grows every year. It connects to other forgotten lines in other cities: London, Prague, Bucharest, Tokyo. Once you've heard the song, it knows you. It waits, sometimes in dreams, sometimes in mirrors, sometimes when the train you're on makes an unexpected stop and the driver doesn't speak. If the doors open and you see red tiles, handprints, and old photos taped to the wall, don't get off. Even if you see someone you love inside, even if they say, "It's your stop," because once the 7th tunnel accepts you, there is no returning, only replacing. Story 2: The Lighthouse Keeper's Final Log. The first thing you notice when the ferry leaves you behind is the silence. No birds, no waves, just wind scraping across the jagged rocks. Malcolm Adair had spent most of his life on the sea, but even he felt something was wrong the moment he stepped onto the island. The air was heavy, the clouds hung low, and the lighthouse above him, tall and bone white, seemed to be watching. It was supposed to be a routine assignment. 3 weeks. Alone. Keep the light on. Record the weather. Send daily logs by radio. That was it. Simple. Isolated. Exactly what Malcolm wanted. He had no family left. No friends worth mentioning. After 20 years working commercial fishing boats from Norway to Nova Scotia, he had grown tired of people, of ports, of noise. This island, this unlisted dot on the map off Scotland's northern coast, was the perfect place to disappear for a while. The lighthouse was built in 1871. They called it Black Rock Light. It had no automation system, no camera feeds, just a rusting generator, a long spiral staircase, and a single beam that had to be rotated and maintained manually. The locals from the nearby village of Ullen refused to come near it. Old stories, ghost talk, fisherman's nonsense. Malcolm didn't care. He just wanted quiet. Day 1. He unpacked, ate in silence, and wrote his first log in the weather book. Winds from the northeast. Thick fog. Visibility low. Light functioning. No incidents. He read an old paperback, drank cheap tea, and listened to the gulls. But there were no gulls. He noticed that again. The sky was empty. Day 2. The fog hadn't lifted. The light worked fine. The generator purred like a cat. But there was something odd about the radio. Each time Malcolm tried to send the log, he heard static feedback. Then, a click, as if someone on the other end had picked up, but never spoke. By the fourth attempt, the static formed a pattern. A kind of breathing. He turned the radio off. Day 4. He found the old journal, tucked in a drawer behind the desk, bound in dark leather. It belonged to the last keeper, a man named Cairns. Dated 23 years ago. His handwriting began strong and clear, but degraded quickly into jagged lines and frantic scribbles. The last few entries weren't in English. Malcolm couldn't place the language. It looked like Gaelic, but wrong. Too many curves, symbols inside letters, and the pages smelled like the sea. Not salt, but rot. He put the book away. Day 5. The knocking started. From the lower floors. It wasn't constant. Just once, sometimes twice in the dead of night. A slow, wet knock, like someone tapping on stone with a bone. Each time Malcolm went down to check, he found nothing. No signs of damage. No loose pipes. No one outside. Just footprints. Bare feet. Covered in brine. Leading upstairs toward the bedroom. Day 7. He began hearing voices. Not clear. Not human. Whispers from the tower stairs. Singing in the fog. A name being called over and over again. Ewan. 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 As if the island still believed he lived there. Malcolm stopped sleeping. Day 9. He broke the radio with a hammer. It wouldn't shut up. It no longer needed power. It just whispered. Day 11. There were now 2 journals on the desk. His and Ewan's. But Malcolm swore he had only brought one. And the entries in both began to match. Word for word. Even the ones Malcolm hadn't written yet. Day 12. He found a door at the bottom of the lighthouse. Behind the old boiler. It hadn't been there before. Carved into the stone above it were 4 symbols. Circular. Like sea glyphs or old ship runes. The door was made of rusted iron. And it was bleeding. He didn't open it. Not yet. Day 13. Fog covered the entire island. He couldn't see the sea. He couldn't hear the wind. And the light above refused to turn off. Even without power. Even during the day. It just kept spinning. And from the highest window of the lighthouse, Malcolm finally saw what it was pointing at. Something in the fog. Something waiting. And it was getting closer. Malcolm didn't sleep that night. The lighthouse felt like it was breathing. Walls creaked in a slow, steady rhythm, like lungs filling and emptying. The lantern above continued its endless spin, casting long, crooked shadows across the spiral stairs. Every time the beam passed the window, it flickered, just for a moment. Malcolm sat at the desk, staring at the iron door behind the boiler. It was still bleeding. A dark, thick fluid oozed from its edges, pooling on the floor like oil. But it didn't smell like oil. It smelled like the ocean floor, wet bones and rust. He had lit every lamp he could find, but somehow the room stayed dim. The shadows on the walls stretched too far, bending at wrong angles. He didn't understand it, but he didn't question it either. He just wrote in the logbook, "There's something beneath the lighthouse. A door. It wasn't here before. I haven't opened it, but I think it's been opened before." He flipped back to Cairns' journal. The final entry had changed. He was sure of it. He had read it before, dozens of times. It used to end with a frantic warning, scribbled in black ink. "Don't let it in." But now it read, "The door doesn't open out. It opens in. Into us." He slammed the book shut. The next morning, the fog hadn't lifted. It had gotten worse. The sea was gone. The island was a white void. Malcolm stood at the edge of the rocks and saw nothing. No horizon. No water. Just fog, stretching into forever. He threw a rock. It made no sound. Back inside, the knocking returned. Harder this time. Rhythmic. Like an old clock with a heartbeat. He followed the sound down the stairs, each step colder than the last. The air grew thick, damp, metallic. When he reached the bottom floor, the boiler room was gone. In its place was a long, narrow corridor, wet stone walls covered in moss and salt. He turned to run back up the stairs, but the staircase was no longer there. Just more hallway behind him. It was like the lighthouse had flipped inside out. He walked. There was no other option. The corridor led downward, spiraling into the earth. The deeper he went, the more the walls began to change. They were no longer made of stone, but something older, ribbed and pulsing, like muscle or fossilized bone. He passed a mirror mounted to the wall. It didn't show his reflection. It showed Ewan, mouth open, screaming, scratching the inside of the glass with blackened nails. Malcolm smashed it and moved on. At the bottom of the spiral, he found a chamber, and in the center, a massive pool. Still, black, unmoving. Floating above it was the light from the tower, spinning slowly in midair, casting beams across the stone walls. And on the far side of the pool, a shape, something humanoid, wrapped in wet burlap. Its head tilted as Malcolm stepped closer. Then it spoke, but not with a voice. The words slid into Malcolm's thoughts, cold and oily. He opened the door for me. Now I need another. You came. You wrote. You watched. You are next. Malcolm backed away, heart pounding. But behind him, the hallway had collapsed. Water leaked from the walls. The pool began to rise. Suddenly, everything snapped. He woke up in his bed, soaked, breathing hard. The radio crackled beside him. A voice whispered through the static. Not English, not Gaelic, but something inside him understood. You've seen it now. You've heard it. The door is in you, and it's opening. The fog never cleared. The iron door was gone, but the spiral staircase now led farther down than it should. And every time Malcolm blinked, the light at the top of the tower spun slower. 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 As if counting down. Malcolm no longer knew how many days had passed. The sun never rose anymore. The sky stayed a pale, milky gray, like a dead eye staring down. The waves no longer reached the rocks. The sea was still, flat like glass. Not calm, just silent. Even time felt broken. His watch had stopped ticking. Clock spun backward. And each time he slept, he dreamed of the pool again. The black water. The voice. The spinning light above it, glowing like an eye that didn't blink. He had stopped sending logs. The radio whispered constantly now, even without power. Sometimes it repeated his own voice back to him, but with different words. Twisted versions. Mocking. Other times, it spoke in Ewan's voice, repeating the same phrase. It saw me first. Then it wanted me to see it. That morning, Malcolm made a decision. He would go back. Back down the stairs. Back to the door that wasn't there anymore. Something inside him was pulling, like a hook buried deep in his chest. He brought a lantern and the old journal. He followed the spiral down, lower than the lighthouse should go. The walls turned from stone to shell, smooth and curving like the inside of a giant mollusk. Seaweed hung from the ceiling, but it was dry and brittle, like it had been there for centuries. And then he reached it again. The pool, still, black, silent. But this time, there was no light above it. Only a hole in the air, like a rip in reality, swirling slowly, dripping mist that rose rather than fell. The thing stood at the edge, facing the water. Taller than before. Human-shaped, but too thin, too long. Its skin was white and stretched, like cloth soaked in salt for too long. Its head turned toward him, but it had no face. Only a vertical slit where a mouth should be. From it came a voice, not sound, but thought, pushed into his mind like a knife. You are the last keeper. The log must end, but not with ink, with memory, with blood. Malcolm fell to his knees. Visions flooded his mind. He saw Ewan, screaming, alone, writing feverishly as the fog took his voice. He saw Ewan open the door. He saw what came out. A shape made of drowned memories, faces with mouths full of seawater, crawling up from the spiral stairs. They whispered forgotten names and filled the halls with laughter that didn't belong. Ewan tried to burn the lighthouse, tried to destroy the pool, but it always rebuilt itself. The lighthouse wanted the light to stay on. It was not a warning light. It was a beacon, a signal to something beneath the sea, calling it home. And now Malcolm understood. He had never been sent here by chance. He had been chosen. A man with no family, no ties, no one who would miss him. The perfect vessel. The perfect page for the final entry. The voice returned. Do you know my name, Keeper? Speak it, or I will show you what lies beneath names. Malcolm opened his mouth to answer, but something else answered for him. The journal in his hand burst open, pages fluttering wildly, then froze on a single entry, not written by him, not by Ewan, but in a language older than both. And the word at the center of the page began to burn. THALSH. The name was not meant for human mouths, but it lived now in Malcolm's memory, burned into his thoughts, branded like fire on his soul. The slit in the creature's face widened. It smiled, and began to step into him. Malcolm screamed as the world dissolved. He was no longer in the lighthouse, no longer on the island. He was under the island, far below the sea, in a temple of bone shaped like a spiral shell, where thousands of keepers knelt in silence, eyes empty, mouths open, still whispering log entries into the dark. And in the center, the thing waited, its form ever shifting, wearing faces like clothes. Ewan's, his own, yours. Malcolm's body still sits at the desk above. The lighthouse still spins. The radio still clicks. And sometimes, when the fog is heavy enough and the wind is right, you can hear the final log entry playing through the static. Day unknown. Light still functions. Door opened. Keeper changed. Do not come here. But it's too late. Because if you're hearing this, it means the signal has reached you too. And the lighthouse has already begun calling. Malcolm no longer had a name. He had a body, yes. He walked, breathed, blinked. But he wasn't inside anymore. Something else was. But sometimes, just for a second, he remembered the smell of coffee, the taste of salt on the wind, the weight of a pen in his hand. Fleeting things. Human things. He clung to those memories like broken planks on a stormed sea. He was still in the lighthouse, but the lighthouse was no longer in the world. The window showed a sky that was black and violet, swirling like ink in water. Stars pulsed with shapes, not light, but eyes. Watching, judging. Outside, the sea was gone, replaced by a shifting field of teeth, rising and falling like waves. They clicked in rhythm, a language too ancient to hear, but he could hear it, in his blood, in his bones. On the 100th night, he found the trapdoor. It was hidden beneath a log desk, nailed shut with rusted spikes. He tore it open with his bare hands, driven by something between instinct and madness. Below was a ladder. Endless. He climbed down. 4 hours. Or days. Or maybe time didn't exist anymore. At the bottom was a room made of mirrors. Each wall reflected a different version of the lighthouse. In one, he saw himself as a boy, watching the sea with a smile. In another, he saw Ewan, but his eyes were hollowed out, and seawater spilled from his mouth. And in the final mirror, he saw a version of himself still human, standing beside a woman with long dark hair. She was smiling. He didn't know her, but he wanted to. His heart cracked just for a second, and in that crack, the truth slipped through. The plot twist began. He was never the first. He was never even Malcolm. He was the echo of the first keeper, a memory brought back by the lighthouse. His name, his job, his identity, all fabricated by the entity so it could keep calling. Each Malcolm before him had gone through the same journey, thought the same thoughts, climbed the same stairs, died the same death. He wasn't the latest log entry. He was a recurring sentence, written again and again by something that wanted only one thing: to be remembered. He screamed. The mirrors cracked. The room dissolved. He was now back in the light chamber. The black pool. The spinning eye. The voice in his skull. But something was different. The light was flickering, unstable. And across the pool stood another figure. Not the creature this time. Not Ewan. Not a reflection. A woman. The woman from the mirror. She stared at him with wide, knowing eyes. Her voice was distant, layered over itself like an echo from far away. "You remember me now," he whispered. "Who are you?" She stepped forward, barefoot on the black stone. "I was the first keeper. Before the lighthouse. Before the sea." Malcolm felt everything inside him collapse. The first keeper wasn't a man. It was her. She had built the lighthouse, not to warn ships, but to seal the god inside. The light was not a beacon. It was a lock. Every 70 years, the lock weakened. So the lighthouse created a Malcolm, a false keeper, to descend and reset the cycle. But this time, "You've been here too long," she said softly. "The lock is breaking. And the thing beneath? It's no longer waiting." The walls began to bleed. The tower trembled. The eye above the pool cracked open, not light anymore but flesh. A massive, yellow, blinking eye rimmed in teeth. It looked at them both. And it remembered. "You broke the page," the voice gurgled. "You turned the log against me." Malcolm felt it reach into his mind, into his memories. He screamed, but the woman held his hand. And for a moment, he saw it all. Before the lighthouse, before the island, there was a gate in the sky, a gate of mirrors and names. The creature came from beyond it. The woman sealed it away inside a lighthouse made of time. She sacrificed herself to become its first jailer. And now, her soul had returned. To finish it. "Do it," she said, placing a rusted key in Malcolm's palm. "Write the final entry." "But I'm not real," he whispered. "I'm not even me. You are now. That's enough." Malcolm climbed the spiral one last time. The storm screamed around him. The glass shattered. The light sputtered. He sat at the desk and opened the logbook. One blank page remained. The ink in the pen was dry, but his hand bled freely. He wrote in his own blood. "Final entry. Keeper unknown. Purpose in the light." And then he turned the key at the base of the lantern. The light went out. Beneath the sea, the pool began to boil. The creature howled, not with rage, but with fear. It was being erased. Its name forgotten. Its story ending. The spiral collapsed. The mirrors shattered. When rescue boats arrived weeks later, they found only the foundation of the lighthouse. The tower was gone. No logs, no keepers, only a rusted lantern, still warm, with a single bloody page inside it. The entry was in a language no one could read. But in the fog, if you hold it to the light, you might hear a voice say, "Don't let the lighthouse turn back on." Story 3. Under Neon Skies of Shinjuku. Tokyo was never truly dark. Even at 2 a.m., the skies over Shinjuku glowed pink and gold from 1,000 neon signs blinking endlessly into the void. The air hummed with electricity, static, and the far-off wails of drunk businessmen stumbling out of karaoke rooms. Kenji Nakamura, 27, didn't belong here. He wasn't a part of the city's rhythm. He only watched it from behind his phone's camera. A freelance photographer from Osaka, he had moved to Tokyo 3 months ago, chasing the dream of becoming a full-time documentarian of city life. But tonight, the city felt different. Wrong. He stood in the alley between two shuttered arcades, framing a shot of a flickering vending machine. The machine buzzed strangely. Not like electricity, but like insects. Inside, every can had the same label. No logos, no color. Just a pure white can with a black symbol that looked like a spiral. He'd never seen that brand before. He raised his camera. Click. As the flash went off, something moved behind the machine. A shape. Too fast. Too low to the ground. He lowered the camera and took a step back, heart racing. The alley was empty. The machine buzzed louder now. Then, the screen turned on, even though the power was off. It showed a face. A fox mask. White, cracked, with red painted lips curled into a smile. Kenji froze. Then the screen blinked once, and the image was gone. He didn't tell anyone about it. Not even Yumi. Yumi was the only friend he had in Tokyo. She worked the night shift at a loss and convenience store down the street. Always tired. Always kind. She didn't believe in ghost stories, as she called them. But Kenji had grown up hearing the Kaiden, old Japanese ghost tales. His grandmother warned him never to walk down alleys after midnight. She said Shinjuku was a graveyard with lights taped to the bones. That memory felt heavier now. That night, Kenji went home to his small apartment in Nishi Shinjuku. He locked the door, shut the blinds, turned off every light. But when he opened his camera to review the alley shot, it wasn't the vending machine. It was a photo of the alley empty, except for one thing. A tall man in a black coat standing directly behind Kenji, just barely visible in the reflection of a broken mirror. His face was hidden behind a fox mask. Kenji dropped the camera. His phone rang. Unknown number. He picked it up. Silence. Then, a whisper in old Japanese. "You saw me. Now I can follow." He didn't sleep that night. Or the next. He began noticing odd things. His reflection didn't always move at the same time he did. Cats stared at him like they recognized something. His neighbor, an old woman who never spoke, began laughing every time he passed her door. By the fourth night, Kenji had lost track of time. Neon signs now buzzed words at him. The subway ran empty. Posters on the wall showed the fox mask, as if it had always been part of the city's branding. He went to Yumi, begged her to listen. She offered him tea and calmly said, "You should never take pictures of things you don't understand. Especially not near the Kitsune gates." He blinked. "Kitsune? You mean fox spirits?" Yumi didn't answer. She just handed him a small paper charm with red ink, shaped like a folded triangle. "Don't let it touch you," she said. "It's not a ghost. It's something older. You gave it your attention. That's how it wakes." Back in his apartment, Kenji taped the charm to his window and locked himself inside. At 3:33 a.m., the power cut out. The hallway light flickered once, then exploded. He heard a knock at his door. Soft, slow, then a voice behind the peephole. "Camera boy, open up. I want to see your smile." Kenji's heart pounded in his chest. The knock came again, softer this time, but it still echoed like a cold breeze slithering under his door. His mind raced. Was it Yumi? Had she come to warn him again? He hesitated for only a moment. He peeked through the peephole. Nothing. The hallway outside his apartment was dark, silent, but something didn't feel right. There was a strange heaviness in the air, the feeling of being watched. Kenji's hand trembled as he reached for the doorknob. He paused. The voice, soft but clear, whispered again, this time from somewhere beyond the door, as if it were inside his apartment. "I can see you, Kenji. You can't hide from me. I am always watching, always waiting." The word sent a cold rush through Kenji's spine. His breath quickened as the weight of the moment pressed down on him. He stepped back from the door, mind racing. What was outside? The knock came once more, louder now, like it was impatient, angry. Kenji's eyes darted to the paper charm still taped to the window. The red ink glowed faintly in the dark, as if it, too, was aware of the presence lurking just beyond his door. Without thinking, Kenji grabbed the charm and placed it over his heart. He'd heard stories, old legends, of the kitsune, the fox spirits who could weave illusions, bend time, and even steal your soul if they desired. But this one felt different. The fox mask, the way it appeared in his photos, like it was reaching out from the camera itself, it felt alive. But he couldn't let fear control him. Not anymore. Kenji pulled open the door. Nothing. The hallway was completely empty. The fluorescent lights above buzzed, flickering intermittently. The air smelled faintly of incense and something rotten, like old paper, burned over too long. He stepped out into the hallway, holding the charm tightly in his palm. The silence was suffocating. But then he heard it. Footsteps. Slow, methodical, deliberate. Not from the direction of the stairwell or elevator, but from behind him. Kenji whipped around, heart pounding, but the hallway was still empty. Empty, except for the reflection of himself, standing still in the shadow of the corridor. Only, it wasn't him. It was the man with the fox mask. The mask in the reflection was tilted slightly, like it was grinning. Kenji's breath caught in his throat as the figure in the reflection moved. It turned toward him. Then, the reflection smiled. The mask twitched. Kenji stumbled back, his eyes wide with horror. It felt like the mask was alive, feeding off the fear radiating from him. He ran. Kenji's feet pounded against the floor as he bolted down the hallway, ignoring the calls of his neighbors who shouted at him to slow down. He didn't care. All he cared about was escaping the sensation that someone, was getting closer, and it wasn't just in his reflection. He reached the stairs and began descending, 2 steps at a time, his heart hammering in his chest. But when he reached the ground floor, the elevator doors opened. A man stood inside, tall, dressed in a dark coat, his back to Kenji, his head bowed. Kenji froze. His breath caught. The man turned, and Kenji saw the face, or rather the mask. A white fox mask, cracked down the middle, its features twisted into an unsettling grin. The red paint smeared like blood, streaked across the surface. Kenji opened his mouth to scream, but nothing came out. His voice was gone. His body refused to move. The man stepped forward, slowly, quietly. "It's time," he said, his voice hollow and echoing like it was coming from somewhere deep underwater. Then it happened. The lights flickered. The walls trembled. The air in the room began to swirl, darkening around Kenji. He stumbled backward, but the man with the fox mask was already there, blocking his way. Kenji tried to speak, to ask what this thing wanted from him. But the man just tilted his head, and the grin on the mask grew wider. "I am not the one who will take your soul," the man whispered, his voice stretching like a low, drawn-out sigh. "I only prepare you for the real fox." Suddenly, the temperature dropped. A coldness filled the room, seeping into Kenji's skin, making his fingers numb. It felt like the world around him was disappearing, fading into an endless void. And then, in a blink, he was no longer in the building. Kenji found himself standing at the edge of a vast, dark forest. There were no lights, no sounds, only the dense trees, their branches reaching up like twisted fingers. The sky above was a sickly shade of violet, like a bruise that never healed. A thick fog began to roll in, and the path in front of him seemed to stretch forever. He took a step forward, but as he did, something in the distance moved. A shadow. A figure watching him from the edge of the trees. The fox mask was glowing now, bright red. Kenji stood frozen, unable to move. The figure stepped forward slowly, its shape now clearer. It was the fox spirit. It was no longer human. Its eyes, two deep, black voids, glared at Kenji with an intensity that burned through his very soul. "You dared to photograph me," the fox spirit said, its voice resonating in his mind. "Now, you must face the consequences." Kenji wanted to scream, to run, but his body wouldn't obey. The fox spirit's eyes pulled him in, paralyzing him with fear, filling his mind with visions of his own death, a slow and agonizing process, all the while the fox would watch, its mask never moving. But before the darkness could swallow him whole, a sharp voice cut through the silence. "You think you're the only one with a story to tell?" Kenji turned his head. It was Yumi. Standing there, her face lit by a strange, otherworldly glow, the same red fox charm glowing in her hand. "You should have listened," she said softly. "But now, you've been caught in the cycle. The kitsune will always come for you." Kenji blinked in disbelief. Yumi stood before him, her features bathed in an eerie, almost unnatural light. The charm she held, glowing red in her hand, seemed to pulse with power. Her eyes, usually so calm, so kind, now radiated something darker, something ancient. "Yumi, what's happening? What do you mean the cycle?" Kenji's voice barely escaped his throat, hoarse and weak. Yumi didn't respond immediately. Instead, she took a few slow steps toward him, her expression unreadable. The air between them crackled, thick with something Kenji couldn't describe. "You should have never taken that picture," Yumi said, her voice low and distant. "By capturing its image, you invited it in. You awakened it." Kenji shook his head, confusion and terror swirling inside him. I didn't know. I thought it was just an old myth, Yumi. I didn't think it was real." Her gaze softened for a brief moment, and she sighed, almost as if she regretted something. "I warned you. I tried to tell you." Suddenly, the air around them grew colder. The ground beneath Kenji's feet seemed to shift, like it was no longer solid. His heart began to race as he turned around, eyes searching desperately for a way out of the oppressive fog that surrounded them. But the fog was alive. "The kitsune, the fox spirit you've unleashed," Yumi continued. "It's not just a creature. It's a curse. It feeds off your fear. And now that it's in you, it will stay with you forever. Until it gets what it wants." Kenji's mind spun. "What does it want? Why me?" Yumi's expression grew more serious. "It wants your soul." Before Kenji could speak, a growl erupted from the shadows of the forest. low, rumbling, and full of malice. Kenji's eyes snapped to the darkened trees, his breath hitching. There, in the thick mist, he could just make out two glowing eyes staring at him. The eyes were like dark pools, sucking in all light around them. "It's here," Yumi whispered, fear in her voice for the first time. "It has already marked you. There's no escape now. You're trapped in its world." Kenji backed away, every muscle in his body screaming for him to run, but his feet were frozen to the ground. The fox spirit, it was out there, somewhere, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. "Why are you helping me?" Kenji gasped, his voice barely audible. "Why now?" Yumi's eyes narrowed, and she took a small step forward. "Because I wasn't always what you think I am." Kenji blinked, trying to process her words. "What are you talking about?" Her hand moved slowly toward her pocket, and she pulled out another charm. This one was different, black, with intricate silver threads woven through it. She held it out to Kenji, her fingers trembling. "I'm not just a convenience store worker," she said quietly. "I'm a guardian, a keeper of the old ways, the ancient practices. I've been watching you because I knew that one day this would happen." Kenji's eyes widened. "You've been watching me? Why didn't you warn me sooner? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you had to see it for yourself," Yumi interrupted, her voice firm now. "The kitsune chooses its victims based on their choices. I couldn't interfere directly, not until you were marked." She took a deep breath. "You chose to take that picture. You chose to confront the curse." Kenji felt a chill run down his spine. "So what now?" Yumi looked into the fog, her face serious, almost resigned. "Now we fight." The forest seemed to close in around them, the fog swirling with unnatural force. Kenji's heart beat louder, faster, as the presence of the kitsune grew stronger. He could feel its gaze on him, like an invisible hand squeezing his chest. Suddenly, a howl pierced the air, sharp and unsettling. It was coming from everywhere. Kenji spun around, searching for the source, but the mist had thickened. The trees were shifting, their branches twisting like long, gnarled fingers reaching out to grab him. "The kitsune is a shapeshifter," Yumi continued, stepping closer to Kenji. "It can take any form it desires, but it's weakest when you face it directly. It's afraid of being confronted." Kenji clenched his fists. "So how do we fight it?" Yumi's eyes darkened, and she glanced at the black charm in her hand. "With this." The ground beneath them shook, and the fog parted briefly, revealing a massive shadow standing in the distance. It was enormous, tall, dark, and moving unnaturally fast. Kenji could barely make it out through the mist, but he knew it was the fox spirit. The mask glowed with an ominous red light, its eyes locking onto Kenji's with a chilling gaze. "Run," Yumi whispered, "but stay close to me." Before Kenji could respond, Yumi began to chant in a language he didn't understand. The words were ancient, flowing with power, the sound of them vibrating through the ground beneath their feet. The kitsune stopped. It stood there, motionless, staring at them both. The red light from its mask flickered, dimming slightly, as if uncertain about Yumi's spell. Kenji could feel a shift in the air, the pressure of the spirit's presence beginning to waver, but just as quickly, the kitsune lunged forward with an impossible speed. Kenji's heart stopped as the kitsune's mask flashed toward him, the grin on its face widening with hungry anticipation. But Yumi wasn't finished. With a swift motion, she raised the black charm toward the spirit. There was a sudden explosion of light, brighter than the sun, so intense that Kenji had to shield his eyes. The kitsune howled in pain, its body writhing and distorting, its form flickering like a broken image on a screen. Kenji stumbled backward, his vision blurred, the air filled with the sound of 1,000 voices, whispers, screams, and laughter filling his mind. The world around him ripped apart. And then, just as quickly as it had started, everything stopped. Kenji opened his eyes. The fog was gone. The forest was silent. Yumi stood beside him, breathing heavily. Her charm was now dim, lifeless. The kitsune was gone, but the feeling of its presence lingered. "Is it over?" Kenji asked, his voice barely a whisper. Yumi looked at him, her eyes filled with an unreadable emotion. "For now. But you've only delayed the inevitable." Kenji's heart sank. She took a deep breath. "The kitsune will return. And next time, it won't be as easy to defeat." Kenji couldn't shake the feeling of unease that clung to him like a second skin. The forest was gone, the fog had cleared, and the kitsune had vanished, at least for now. But the terror still lingered, wrapping around his thoughts, tightening with every breath he took. Yumi's words echoed in his mind. The kitsune will return. And next time, it won't be as easy to defeat. She had done something to drive the kitsune away. But Kenji had no idea what. All he knew was that he was tied to this creature now, bound by a curse he couldn't escape. Yumi walked beside him in silence as they made their way out of the forest, back toward the bustling city of Shinjuku. The neon lights flickered like a distant dream, but Kenji couldn't feel their warmth. It was as if the lights had lost their color, and everything now looked like a ghost of what it once was. As they entered a quiet alley, Yumi turned to face him. "You don't understand, Kenji," she said, her voice low. "What you saw wasn't just the kitsune. It was a trial. The fox spirit has many forms, many faces. And the mask you saw, the one in your photos, isn't its true form. It's a trap." Kenji's head spun. "A trap? But it felt real. It chased me, Yumi. It tried to kill me." Yumi's expression darkened. "That was just the beginning. The kitsune feeds off fear, yes, but it also feeds off your memories, your emotions, your deepest regrets. It's not a simple creature. It's a hunter." She stepped closer, her eyes intense. "And you become its prey." Kenji's breath hitched. "What do you mean? Why me?" Yumi sighed, rubbing her temples, as if the weight of this knowledge was too much to bear. "You didn't just take a photograph of it, Kenji. You stole something from it. You captured a part of its soul, a fragment of its essence, and now it's coming after you to take it back. That's why it's been following you." Kenji shook his head, trying to make sense of her words. "But why me? I don't understand." Yumi's gaze turned sorrowful. "Because you were chosen." Kenji froze. "Chosen? By who? By what?" But before Yumi could answer, the ground beneath their feet rumbled. A cold wind swept through the alley, knocking over the trash cans and sending the papers flying into the air. The neon lights flickered violently, casting long, eerie shadows across the pavement. Kenji spun around, fear gripping him once more. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw it. A figure. Tall, cloaked in shadows, its outline shifting with every second. The fox mask, the same mask, glowed faintly in the darkness, its eyes now redder than before, like burning embers. It wasn't just a mask. It was something alive. And then, the figure stepped forward. Kenji's breath caught in his throat. It was him. The same man he had seen in the reflection in the elevator. The man with the fox mask. But now, he was taller, his form distorted, like he was growing before Kenji's eyes. "You've come so far, Kenji," the man said in a voice that seemed to echo from all around him. "But you're too late." Kenji took a step back, his heart racing. "What do you want from me? What do you want?" The figure tilted its head, as if amused by Kenji's desperation. "What I want? You've already given me what I need. Your memories, your soul. I just need you to remember. And then, in an instant, the world around Kenji shifted. Kenji was no longer standing in the alley. The streets of Shinjuku had vanished, replaced by a long, dark corridor. The walls were lined with photographs. The same photographs he had taken of the kitsune. Only now, they were distorted, their colors swirling and changing, faces melting into shapes Kenji didn't recognize. He turned to Yumi, but she was gone. Only the masked figure remained. "Do you recognize it now?" the figure asked, its voice coming from everywhere at once. "This place is inside your mind, Kenji. The images you've taken, the memories you've stolen, they're all here. All mine." Kenji stumbled backward, his eyes wide with terror. No, this can't be real." "Oh, it's real. Every photo you took, every memory you thought you had forgotten, they're all pieces of me now." The figure stepped closer, its mask glowing brighter. "You see, Kenji, you've been hunting something you don't fully understand. You've been following the fox's trail. But what you don't know is, the fox is already inside you." Kenji's head spun. "What are you talking about? Inside me? How?" The figure reached up, its hands trembling as it lifted the fox mask off its face. And then Kenji saw it. It wasn't a man beneath the mask. It was Yumi. Her eyes, wide, terrified, stared at him. But her body was wrong. Her skin was ashen, her limbs twisted unnaturally, and her mouth was stretched into a sickening grin. "I didn't want to tell you this, Kenji," Yumi's voice echoed through the hall. "But you already met the kitsune. And now, it's time for you to become it." Kenji stepped back in horror, his mind struggling to understand what was happening. But the Yumi thing, no, it wasn't Yumi anymore, took a step forward, its voice now low and dripping with malice. "You will remember, Kenji. All of it. And when you do, you will see that we have always been the fox." Kenji stood frozen in the corridor, his eyes locked on the figure that had once been Yumi. Her twisted form moved with an unsettling grace, like a shadow lurching in the dark. "You've become a part of this world now, Kenji. You can never leave. Not after what you've done," the distorted version of Yumi whispered, her voice now layered with multiple tones, echoing from every direction. "You've already seen the fox. You've already joined the hunt." Kenji's heart pounded in his chest. His head was spinning, every thought swirling together into a chaotic mess of fear and confusion. The photographs, the memories, everything he thought he had known was now shattering before his eyes. "No," Kenji gasped, his voice barely audible. I don't understand. I didn't choose this. I never wanted this." The distorted Yumi, or whatever it was now, took a step closer, its glowing mask now cracked, exposing the inhuman entity beneath. Its eyes, once soft and kind, were now hollow, filled with an otherworldly emptiness. "But you did choose it, Kenji. You wanted answers. You wanted to see the truth. And now you see it all." Kenji shook his head, his breath catching in his throat. "What truth? What do you mean?" The Yumi thing tilted its head, almost curiously. It seemed amused by his confusion. "The truth is that you were always meant to be a part of this. The fox spirit, the curse, it's in your blood, Kenji. Your photographs were never just images. They were pieces of the puzzle. Your mind opened the door, and now the kitsune has marked you. Your soul is mine." Kenji's stomach dropped. "No, I refuse to believe that." The figure smiled, its lips stretching unnaturally wide. "You don't have a choice. The kitsune doesn't ask for permission, Kenji. It takes. And once it takes, it never lets go." In an instant, Kenji felt his body jerk forward, his legs moving on their own accord. It was as though invisible hands were pulling him, dragging him deeper into the darkness. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, twisting and turning in ways that shouldn't have been possible. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. The Yumi thing was beside him now, its cold hand gripping his shoulder, its touch like ice. "You'll never escape this," it whispered. "Not until the cycle is complete." Kenji struggled, but his body wouldn't obey him. His mind was racing, desperate for a way out. The cycle. What did it mean? What did it have to do with him? Then it hit him. The photographs. All those pictures he had taken. All those moments captured, frozen in time. They weren't just memories. They were anchors. They had tied him to the kitsune, tethering his soul to its endless hunt. The Yumi thing smiled wider, its teeth sharp and glistening. "You understand now, don't you? You've been a part of this world all along. The moment you clicked that camera, you signed your fate." Kenji's eyes widened in horror. He could feel it now. His very soul, his essence, was being pulled away, piece by piece, into the darkness. The photographs he had taken, once simple images, now felt like chains. He had been marked from the very beginning. Suddenly, a piercing, familiar voice broke through the suffocating darkness. "Kenji! You don't have to do this!" Kenji's heart skipped a beat. It was Yumi's real voice, not the twisted, distorted one. He turned, and there she was, standing at the far end of the corridor, looking as she had when they first met. Her eyes were filled with desperation, her hand reaching toward him. "Yumi!" Kenji shouted, his voice hoarse. "Help me!" The Yumi thing let out a low growl, its form flickering, as if it was about to tear apart. It reached out to grab Kenji, but he pushed away, stumbling toward the real Yumi. "You have to listen to me, Kenji," the real Yumi called out. "This isn't you. You're stronger than the curse. You've always been stronger than it." Kenji's eyes flickered between the two Yumis. He didn't know which one to trust. The twisted one was powerful, almost magnetic, drawing him in with its sickening presence. But the real Yumi was offering him hope, her eyes pleading with him. "How do I stop it?" Kenji asked, his voice breaking. Yumi's face softened, and she took a step forward. "You have to break the cycle. You have to destroy the very thing that keeps you tied to the kitsune." Kenji's eyes widened. "How? How do I do that?" Yumi looked down at the charm in her hand, the black one she had used earlier. "There's a way, but it requires sacrifice." Kenji's chest tightened. "What kind of sacrifice?" Yumi hesitated, but only for a moment. "You have to let go. Let go of the memories. Let go of the photographs. You must destroy the very essence of what you've captured. It's the only way to sever the bond. The kitsune feeds on your fear, but it also feeds on the pieces of you it's taken. If you destroy the pictures, if you destroy the memories, you destroy its hold over you." Kenji's breath quickened. "But if I do that, I'll lose everything. I'll forget it all. Yumi, you'll be gone." Yumi's expression softened, her eyes filled with sadness. "It's the only way, Kenji. The kitsune will never let go of you otherwise. You'll be its prisoner forever. You have to decide now." Kenji closed his eyes, his mind reeling with the weight of the decision. He had already lost so much. His connection to Yumi, to the world, was slipping away piece by piece. But could he truly let go? Could he forget everything? Suddenly, he knew what he had to do. Kenji grabbed the nearest photograph, a picture of the kitsune he had taken in the forest. His hand shook as he stared at it, the face of the fox spirit staring back at him. The memories flooded back, the fear, the darkness, the presence that had haunted him. But now, he could feel it, the pull of the curse, the bond that tied him to it. With a single, decisive motion, Kenji tore the photograph in half. The instant he did, a deafening scream filled the air, shaking the very ground beneath him. The darkness around him began to crack, like glass breaking, and the twisted Yumi shrieked in rage. Kenji felt something shift inside him, as if the weight of 1,000 memories had been lifted from his chest. The fog around him cleared, and the cursed corridor dissolved into nothingness. And then, just as suddenly, the world was quiet. Kenji opened his eyes. He was standing back in the streets of Shinjuku. The neon lights were bright once more, casting their warm glow over the city. The air felt different, lighter. And Yumi, she was gone. For a moment, Kenji felt a pang of loss, but it quickly faded. The curse was broken. The kitsune was no longer after him. He had one.